Why hasn't the stream ended? That was the question that sparked thousands of theories across the internet. A streamer's final broadcast left viewers horrified. Strange sounds, shadowy movements, and then static. Tonight, we unpack every chilling detail and the one twist no one saw coming. The streamer's ordinary night, until it wasn't. Imagine sitting on your couch, scrolling through streams late at night. You click on a familiar face. A streamer whose Q&A sessions you've watched a dozen times before. Her voice greets you just like always. Warm, friendly, unconcerned. But as the chat rolls in, something feels different. It's hard to put your finger on at first. Maybe it's just the faint distortion in her audio, or the way the video freezes for a split second. These aren't things you'd normally notice or care about, but tonight, they seem to hang in the air a little longer, making you shift uncomfortably in your seat. The streamer on screen is someone whose life is an open book. She isn't a megastar by any means, but she's built a tight-knit community that shows up like clockwork for her late-night streams. Her content feels real, messy in a way that's relatable, with stacks of books and half-empty coffee cups decorating her apartment. You're used to her cracking jokes with her audience, offering glimpses into her day, and answering random questions from her followers in what feels more like a casual chat than anything formal. The simplicity of it is part of the charm. It's just her audience, and a camera. That night was no different, or at least it shouldn't have been. The session began as it always did, with her laughing into the microphone and tossing out replies to the usual mix of comments flooding her chat. Someone asked about the unkempt pile of laundry behind her, and she rolled her eyes playfully before throwing out a self-deprecating one-liner that sent a wave of lol messages scrolling through the feed. If something was off, she didn't seem to notice, at least not yet. The first glitch was subtle. Her voice doubled up for a few seconds, like an eerie echo trailing behind every word she said. She paused briefly, adjusted her headset, and brushed it off with a shrug. When the video stuttered a few moments later, freezing her mid-laugh in a pixelated mess, she waved a hand dismissively at the camera. "Internet's being dramatic," she quipped and kept going. Her chat, however, wasn't so quick to laugh it off. Messages like, "Was that just me?" and "Anyone else's stream acting weird?" peppered the comments. Still, nothing seemed unusual enough to stop her flow. Technical hiccups happen on live streams all the time. One study found that nearly 60% of content creators encounter connectivity or software issues while streaming. Audio cuts out, frames drop. Sometimes it's just the platform itself acting up, overwhelming servers with too much traffic. For those watching, it's an expected inconvenience, not something to worry about. But this felt different. The glitches weren't just annoying, they were creeping into the edges of the experience, almost like they didn't want to go unnoticed. As her Q&A session gained momentum, the chat started picking up on something else entirely. "Did anyone see that?" someone typed, quickly drowned out by newer comments. Moments later, another viewer chimed in. "There's something in the back." The streamer, facing directly into the camera, didn't have the vantage point her viewers did. Behind her, her apartment stretched into soft shadows, the warm lighting failing to touch the far corners of the room. A shadow fluttered across the wall, quick, faint, easy to ignore, but hard to forget once you'd noticed it. The chat couldn't agree on what they'd seen. "Glitch?" one person guessed. "Reflection?" someone else suggested. Others weren't convinced. "That looks like movement." A flood of comments began insisting, yet no one completely agreed on what it was. A few experimental jokesters chimed in, "It's a ghost, lol," while others dismissed it altogether. What none of them could deny, though, was how this small point of contention shifted the mood. This was no longer just another laid-back stream. Unaware of the growing tension behind her screen, she kept chatting. Watching her felt surreal at that moment, like screaming at a character in a horror movie who doesn't know the danger behind them. Every new shadow, every slight visual distortion was a nod to something the audience couldn't quite articulate. The debate in chat grew louder, splitting into theories and counter-theories. By now, her usual jokes about late-night snacks and messy routines felt miles away. Everyone was watching the background more than her. But these glitches, flickers, and faint movements were just the start. The real disturbances hadn't even begun, when the apartment became a character. What if the one place you felt safest suddenly turned on you, while thousands of strangers watched from the other side of a screen? Her apartment, at first glance, was the kind of space that felt familiar, almost comforting. A small city unit, with too few square feet to ever feel empty, yet just big enough to convince you you'd never really be alone. Warm light spilled from mismatched lamps, creating a cozy glow over cluttered shelves packed with books, small decorations, and the occasional playful knick-knack, remnants of a life lived in the company of a streaming audience. Against one wall, her desk faced the camera, making her the centerpiece of the scene while the rest of her apartment stretched into soft, shadowy corners. From the stacks of mugs on her coffee table to the mountain of clothes lazily shoved into a chair, it was the kind of place that whispered authenticity, a little messy, a little lived in, normal, utterly normal. But as her Q&A continued that night, normalcy began slipping away. It wasn't just the flickers or glitches anymore. The viewers started to pick up on something far harder to dismiss. The first knock was faint, so faint in fact, that some blamed their own headphones for the sound. It might have been from the apartment above hers or echoed through the hallway outside. Whatever it was, it happened just as she was mid-sentence answering a light-hearted question about her favorite late-night snacks. The noise didn't seem to register with her at all. This was New York, or maybe Chicago or Boston, some anonymous city where faint noises were part of the fabric of daily life. But for an audience hyper-focused on every pixel of her feed, the sound settled uncomfortably, like a pinprick at the back of the neck. The second knock came louder, sharper. This time, she noticed, her words faltered for a fraction of a second as her head tilted toward the source of the sound. Her brows knit together briefly, but then she laughed, a short, self-conscious laugh. "Did you guys hear that too?" she asked, brushing it off as quickly as it happened. The chat exploded, a storm of confirmation, speculation, and jokes about delivery drivers at odd hours. "It's probably the neighbors," she added, pushing on with her stream. But now her upbeat tone sounded ever so slightly thinner, like she was trying too hard to break the unease crawling under her skin. The noises didn't go away. A low, muffled thud came from somewhere behind her, like the weight of something shifting that shouldn't have moved. Her easy flow on camera started to crack just a little, her glance darting occasionally to the edges of the room or over her shoulder. She wasn't rattled yet, not quite, but those subtle, nervous pauses stretched like tension tightened slowly over a string. And worse, her viewers were catching every barely contained twitch of discomfort. Comments flooded in. "Behind you! What was that sound? And is this a prank?" They seemed desperate to pull her out of her obliviousness, yet strangely powerless to actually intervene. What could they do, really, except keep watching? The psychological weight of performing live turned her visible discomfort into something almost excruciating to witness. There's something deeply unsettling about a person's private fear being broadcast while a live audience watches every glance, hears every stammer. You see it all, and yet you can do nothing. Studies even suggest that urban environments, especially for those living alone, amplify feelings of vulnerability. External sounds become exaggerated. Every creak or groan of a building feels loaded with intensity. Add thousands of strangers dissecting every moment, and it only heightens the discomfort. When the faint sound of footsteps echoed down her hallway, the unease deepened. It wasn't loud, but it was noticeable, distinct from the city's casual chaos. "Okay," she said, her voice tight though she forced a smile. "I think the neighbors are really going for it tonight." The chat wasn't buying it. Any claims of coincidence melted away when something shifted on the edge of the frame. A book sliding off the shelf behind her, with no warning and no obvious cause. It wasn't dramatic, just a dull thud as it tumbled to the floor. She froze mid-word. Silence stretched between her and her audience. When she finally moved, it wasn't confident. It was stiff, hesitant, as though the air itself felt heavier now. "That happens sometimes," she murmured, though her voice quivered at the edges. The chat was in chaos, rapidly splitting between "get out" and "what is going on." Her laughter came too late to sound convincing. Meanwhile, her unease became impossible to miss. The slight tremor in her voice, the way her hand toyed nervously with her headphone cord, her inability to keep her focus on the audience. And just as it seemed the worst had passed, it happened, the sound of a door creaking open off camera. She froze, her head snapping to the side, her eyes locked on the unseen hallway behind her. A stunned silence gripped her chat, every viewer transfixed. The next few seconds would spiral into something none of them would forget, the incident that left everyone speechless. Thousands of people were watching when it happened. Some were longtime fans, others just casual lurkers. But in those final moments before it all went wrong, one thing united them: helpless silence. The noises had grown louder now, no longer faint or distant, but intrusive in a way that made them impossible to ignore. To everyone in the chat, it seemed like she was seconds from figuring out something was seriously wrong. But to watch her in those moments was maddening. She kept bouncing between distracted reassurances to her audience and long silences, her gaze flicking to the darkened hallway behind her, where the door stood slightly ajar. She tried to ignore it, that much was obvious. Probably just the wind, she had muttered under her breath earlier, forcing out a laugh that fooled no one. But the chat wasn't letting it slide. "It's not the wind!" one user spammed over and over. "Call someone!" yelled another. Still, she stayed put, her movements more restless now, adjusting the angle of her camera, nervously toying with her hair. Each second stretched longer than the last. It all came to a head when the chat exploded. The camera feed, still facing her cozy apartment, captured something that made everyone's stomach drop. At first it was subtle, just a flicker of motion in the far corner of the room, near the edge of the screen. Some thought it was a glitch, maybe another artifact from the technical issues earlier, but then, as the camera autofocused, it became clearer. A figure, not distinct, just a blurred suggestion of someone moving in the shadows. She didn't notice it at first, too focused on a question from the chat. Her eyes remained locked on the screen. Meanwhile, the live comments spiraled into chaos. "Who is that? Right there, OMG, look! Is this staged?" Thousands of frantic messages flew by, yet she seemed oblivious, still answering a question about her streaming schedule. The figure moved again, closer, more deliberate. This time she paused. Her voice faltered mid-sentence, her laughter dying before it could even fully form. That was when she noticed it, not in the room itself, but reflected faintly in her monitor. Her face changed in an instant. The color drained. Her eyes widened, lips parting as though she wanted to scream but couldn't. She slowly turned her head toward the shadowy corner off-screen, her movements stiff, almost robotic. The audience held their breath. No one typed for a solid 3 seconds, a feat in itself for any livestream chat. When she finally spoke, her voice came out uneven, a cracked whisper. "Hello? Is someone there?" No response, just silence. Or at least, what should have been silence. If you listened closely, you could hear faint breathing, so faint that it could have been hers, except it didn't match. Hers was fast, shallow, panicked. This one was slow, deliberate, and too steady. Her hand hovered near her desk as if reaching for something. A phone, maybe, but didn't move far enough to grab anything. Frozen in fear, she just sat there, staring into the darkness of her apartment, while thousands of people begged her to leave in the comments. This moment is part of what makes livestream horror so uniquely terrifying. There's a phenomenon psychologists call spectator helplessness, where viewers of a real-time event feel powerless to intervene despite witnessing clear danger. The chat's collective voice grows louder, more urgent, but there's no way to act. All they can do is watch, and maybe that's the scariest part. You're a witness to something awful, and no amount of typing can stop it. The tension snapped when the camera abruptly jolted, shaking violently as though yanked from its mount. Her scream cut through the feed, shrill and unmistakable, before the entire stream collapsed into harsh static. For a moment, it seemed like it was over. Viewers sat in collective shock, staring at the distorted image and wondering if they had just watched something horrific unfold. But then the stream resumed. No warning, no transition, just her apartment, exactly as it was before. Except now it was empty, silent, motionless. The chair where she'd been sitting swayed slightly, the only hint of movement in the frame. Yet the chat wasn't empty. New comments began to appear, though no one watching claimed to be typing. Simple phrases like "we see you" and "she's not gone" filled the screen, repeating endlessly. The stream wouldn't end no matter how many times viewers refreshed, and that empty, unmoving apartment was all that remained. So? The live stream never ended. Days stretched into weeks, and the broadcast continued, a frozen window into an empty apartment. Police had long since arrived, searched, and left with no answers, deeming it an isolated incident. Still, the stream remained live, an unbroken loop of nothingness, yet new comments mysteriously trickled in. "She's still here," one read. "Don't look away," said another. It's a haunting reminder of how much of our lives are exposed online, how many eyes are watching unnoticed, and how many details, however small, might invite the wrong kind of attention. The stream plays on, but no one knows why.